Good afternoon. After lunch, no energy. Good afternoon. Yeah, so I think it's a privilege to host this panel. We've got people coming from diverse background, and I was on my way to this center. I was like, what is the best start? So imagine a mom and pop store, any grocery kirana store. It would be most likely made by a CK Birla cement, if I'm not wrong. Group, okay. It will be having electricity through Tata Power. It will surely be having a lot of stuff of Yippee and Bingo from ITC. And of course, to pay for that, it will be Mastercard. So we've got an omni-channel presence, and the topic is also very, very important and nice. And I would like everyone to be part of this. And we've got one of the best group in terms of marketing. So we'll have a small, quick introduction first, starting with Jyoti.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jyoti here from Tata Power. I look after the brand and communications for the company.
Thank you, Jyoti. My name is Deepali Naair. I am the Group Chief Marketing Officer for CK Birla Group. In the group, we have 10 diversified businesses in cement, like he was mentioning. You're familiar with Orient Cement, Orient Electricals, Orient Paper. We also have the Birla IVF and fertility clinics. We have hospitals. We also have Birla Soft, the IT services company. We run schools. We run engineering college, the BIT Mesra Ranchi. But just before this, I used to work for IBM, and I've spent years in financial services. I've also spent time at Marico, which is where you started your career. I've also spent time at Marico. And the other interesting thing that I would request you to do is please check out my podcast. It's called Being CEO with Deepali Naair. We've done a very good job of the SEO. So if you see my name, spelling, and just type podcast, you will get my podcast.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Suresh, and I'm a Vice President and Head of Marketing for the ITC Foods Division, where I handle the snacks, noodles, and the pasta portfolio. I started obviously with Marico, but after that I've been for now 15, 16 years with ITC and done various stints between cigarette, sales, foods. So that's my experience has been.
Hi, I'm Puneeth, Bekal here. I'm a thoroughbred marketer and a brand strategist. I've been fortunate to work across auto ancillaries, real estate, FMCG, brand strategy, retail, and now I work in fintech in Mastercard. Thank you.
I think I forgot to introduce myself. So I started my career with ITC, of course. In fact, I was blessed to be part of almost every company's building blocks. With the 22 years of work ex in the corporate world, I chose the tougher path of becoming an entrepreneur now, and we are having a very healthy debate on that. But one thing that I've realized as either a corporate professional with either ITC, Pidilite, or Renault, or even AGS is, and now the startup and social impact world, that marketing is always the heartbeat of any company. Size doesn't matter, it could be a startup or a big organization, but if go-to-market is the brains, then marketing is the heartbeat, and I think that is what we want to discuss. So my first question would be to Deepali, because she's got 3.7 million, or how many followers? 37,000.
On which platform are you talking about?
Podcast.
He's giving me an opportunity to do this for myself, okay?
So let's deep dive into the topic first. And it's always a debate whether marketing is all about the short-term goals or the long-term ones. So your perspective on that.
What I want to say is that, across the years, I've worked in FMCG. I've worked in financial services. Started my life with Tata Motors, so durables, and now I look at a diversified group. The answer is not as simple. I think if I look at all the FMCG marketers today, and even my days as an FMCG marketer, the long-term KPIs matter to everyone, including the board, including the CEO. And that's how marketing used to get defined in those days, in the early years. Over my 3 decades of experience, I can share that with you. But life has changed considerably in the last 15 years, especially in financial services, consumer tech, healthcare businesses, domains where marketing is helping in acquisition of business. There, the short term has become extremely important. So you have different structures. You have CMOs who only do marketing communications and are not responsible for the acquisition or the performance marketing. Then there are CMOs who are responsible for both, because they do the acquisition marketing or the lead acquisition, and to them the short term matters considerably, and you cannot compromise the short term and the long term. And then you have, completely different structures where it is further split, completely. So to start with, Sunil, the answer is not as simple, When I look at my own role today, as a group chief marketing officer, I need to ensure that my brand and all the respective brands that we have in the group are doing a great job. My KPIs would largely be long term. However, do I get called in to solve the short term problems, that this quarter sales is not happening or that my next quarter is not working very well out? You need to solve those problems too. And that's what I did at IBM. So IBM, for example, as an IBM CMO, I lived and died every quarter. The sales numbers for the country, for all the 6 BUs, used to sit on my goal sheet, and I needed to make them happen. Not only that, I needed an eye on, because I would be responsible for developing the leads and nurturing the leads in the lead volume, I would absolutely need to keep an eye on the next quarter and the next quarter and the next year. So I think in today's day and age, especially if a marketer has the responsibility for performance marketing or acquisition marketing, whatever you call it, in any manner, you just cannot compromise on the short term, not at all. You will die, you will probably lose your job. But if you don't deliver the long term, the short term will not happen, in any case. So to my mind, it is not so much, the debate. It's about nuance that changes in every industry.
Absolutely agreed. I would ask the other panelists to probably add on, or if there's any difference of opinion, they can speak on the same topic. And then after every question, we'll have the audience to ask the lead panelists, because we don't want this to be a one-way conversation.
Well, just to add further, and this whole debate about long-term and short-term. Now, if you look at from an FMCG point of view, and let's take a lot of widely penetrated categories, let's take just as an example a biscuit. Every household, on an average, there are almost 64 occasions in a year that a household is buying a biscuit. So hence, there are those many occasions in which newer brands can come in and get trial generated. So in the categories like FMCG, where there are really huge number of occasions which are there, the short term also play an extremely critical role. While we can keep talking about saying a long-term vision, but that it is about these many occasions and the presence that you have in the outlet. You need all the charged up team, both from a consumer side, certain excitement, you want a trade excitement, and you also need a sales team excitement. So hence this entire short term may seems as a shortcut, but that is the reality how consumer is purchasing. And those are the kind of attention spans that the different brands can get. Yes, you have to remain consistent and you have to remain distinctive, but if you think that the consumer will change only in long term, and if you are able to build brand, it's a combination of these short term activities, efforts which are being put up, which lead to the long term goal or the objective. That's the way that I see it.
I think you've added a very, very important point, and this is for the audience. And this is coming from hardcore data that I thought it's more, but 64 is also not a small number. But look at the difference between both the companies, or currently both the brands, in terms of the way they engage with their customer, because the touch points are probably 64 times in a year. And in a lot of evolved categories of Birla, CK Birla Group, it may not be that high because the instances are lower. In fact, I don't know if you know this or not, before you joined ITC, there was this huge ATL of pasta. I think it was 2005. And sometimes too much of marketing is also worrying some. There was this TV ad, and everybody wanted Sunfeast pasta. And we were not prepared. And people used to loot our trucks and go to the distributor point because the merchants were feeling, I need pasta too, and we were not ready. So sometimes we have to balance that piece also. I don't know whether you remember that or not, but okay. So now to the audience, if someone can please pass the mic. So linked to this question only, if someone would want to add or ask the panelist on this point, which is short-term versus long-term. You need to volunteer or we'll ask you.
I would like to add
Yeah,
something
please,
on
sorry.
this one.
Puneeth would like to add and say.
So the thing is, what, I mean, after listening to both of you, I have a point of view on how do you define short-term and long-term, right? Because long-term has a different set of goals, and short-term has a different set of goals altogether. Like, for example, when you look at long-term campaigns or executions or creatives or whatever it might be, you look at building a brand halo, you look at building brand affinity, loyalty possibly, and more importantly, how do you look at reduce price elasticity, or the fact that you can maintain price premiums because of the long-term halo that you are developing for the brand. When you look at a short-term aspect, here you're looking at volumes, you're looking at discounting, you're looking at quick transactions. So you're looking at different goals for different aspects. So in my view, I would look at, I would say that it's also there's empirical evidence today that, long-term effects have its effect on short-term campaigns as compared to, and reverse is not true. That means the accumulation of short-term campaigns does not necessarily impact or affect the long-term goals. So, you need to look at both, I'll not say disparate, but in conjunction, but separately.
Puneeth, to add to what you're saying, and I agree with you, the short term, if you do it wrong, can damage the long-term equity, but may not necessarily add to the long-term equity. Yeah.
Anyone needs to ask anything to Deepali or Puneeth, or you would want to add on to this point? Otherwise, we'll move to the second one. Okay. So now I'll move on to Suresh because he's coming from an FMCG world. Just if you can quote certain use cases or examples of a success story in ITC or beyond in terms of a short-term gratification or a long-term strategy. And if by any chance you can share a failure as well, it'll be great for the audience because I think we know that failures also happen.
Yeah, so if you look at from my experience that I have worked, so I had worked on Ashirvad for a long time, and that's now I moved into the Sunfeast side of it. Now, in case of an Ashirvad, which is about in a staples, it's about creating a habit change. It's about how do you change consumer who are currently using a wheat or a loose atta format to a branded packaged atta. And that's where a long-term commitment over the quality, that same consistent product that you have been able to deliver year after year, month after month, and the same promise of a nurturance being communicated to the consumer. Now, all these have remained consistent over the years, right from the day of its launch, and that is the reason that it is the #1 atta which is there. It's an extremely strong brand from a consumer side that you see. This is the long-term side of it. So when we say long-term, it is about being consistent in what you say, keep adding to your equity, and give back to the consumer the same promise that you're telling them, and you have to remain consistent on that. Now, as far as short-term, and as a more, there are multiple categories in which ITC is a #2 or a #3 as a challenger brand. And that's where you have to bring in the whole excitement piece into the play. So we are a very strong #2 player in the noodles category. And some of our promos that we have done, so we have done a Loot Mal promo, which was an offer in which, and it was almost like a first time. So one, we had worked in which the gratification was that consumer will get a certain time and in which they can go to a modern trade store and pick up all the things that they can in say 1 minute. Now that as a equity also we have been consistent, we have tried to use it multiple times and obviously in a different format, but it has given excellent result to generate trial, because one of the critical part and specifically from an FMCG point of view, is to generate these trials. And like I was saying earlier, there are multiple locations. Now, these short-term activities help you to generate those trials, and after that, if your product is good, consumer is willing to buy that again and again. So these are some of the examples which are there in my mind in terms of both the long-term as well as the short-term point of view.
So I'll pick from what you said about the short term, especially when you're trying to do a habit change or create behavioral change. Short term is definitely very critical because you have to enforce the trial. But I think that also reinforces how important long term is, because if you don't over a period of time be consistent, that short term offer or incentive is never going to result in long term value. And I think this holds true not only for FMCG brands, but even for the kind of brands which are in newer categories, especially from the finance perspective, or like I now work on the EV charging cards perspective, right? So we can make the consumer buy a card or even give it to them free. But then the value to the business comes when they consistently use it. And if I don't keep my eye on the long term, there is no way that I'm going to be able to extract any value out of that card. So the long term value that we want for the business, how do we ensure that with a consistent set of efforts, like you were saying, from the long to the short, they will add back. From the short, the positive impact is limited, but the negative is much higher. And where behavior change is concerned, it adds another nuance to it. So you have to keep the eye on the bigger goal, but ensure that you are doing things in pieces so that they eventually add up to a larger number.
Okay, so I think I absolutely agree with Suresh. Again, sorry, I'll be using ITC examples, but our market was the first market where we sold Ashirwad Atta. It was at 99 rupees that time when we launched. And that time it was like, how would we even fight people like Shakti Bhoga or Pillsbury, and especially the loose atta, the chakki atta piece. And look at today, 2 decades after this, and you're saying it's already number one. It's all because of the consistent vision or the long-term marketing that would have been done, and which has given so much of result. And the second thing is, I was not knowing about the Lootmar campaign. Whenever it is happening next, let me know. I'll go and buy my stuff as well. Okay, the audience, anything in terms of the use case that Suresh quoted or any other? Yeah, please. Can you pass on the mic, please? That gentleman in the center.
Hi, this is Rennie Abraham. I'm a journalist. My question is, hello, can you hear me? Yeah, from the long-term marketing perspective, I mean, we have just seen a recent disruption where another model of marketing where there was an umbrella brand that would hawk across the board products, Amway, which came into a lot of disruption in the in the media and for over various issues. But when you talk about long-term strategies, so what is the learnings from that experience? I mean, when it's brands like ITC and they have been consistently maintaining quality standards. So what is the learning from this umbrella brand concept that seems to be going awry? Is it the nature of the quality of products that they hawk? How do you look at it from a long-term strategy gone awry, so to speak?
Who would like to take this?
So I'll try and address it.
If I may add, like we've also seen, shopping brands, that have invested hugely, even in the transport business like Uber. And it's a strategy, it's a long-term strategy to probably suffer losses and in a long-drawn affair, where then eventually they get to have a huge market share. So I mean, from these two.
So whatever that I have understood of that question, let me address that. Now, as far as, and let's start from the end. What you talked about Uber and Ola, these are business models. Now, the brand or the marketing part of it is that almost everybody in this room will have both the apps. Okay? It is about which is the app that you will open up first. That is what the marketing is all about. It's not about the business model per se. Both are business model, both can sustain or not sustain, we'll see that part. But the marketing can only ensure which is the first app that you will open. After that, there would be waiting time, etc., because of which you might shift to the other app. But that is the only part which the marketing can deliver in terms of creating that salience, that if I had to think of travel, which is the first brand that I have. Now, tomorrow, and like which is happening in both, say, Ola as well as Uber, they are also trying to expand into other businesses, which is either of a delivery, whether it is from a food delivery to an article delivery. So those are the business model that everybody will try and expand into. Marketing can aid if the promise is about timeliness, and the other associated business which may come under the same umbrella brand hold the same promise. That is where whatever connect that you have built with consumer over the years, which is about promise of being timely, is what, if it can aid into your other business model, it will have a rub-off effect. If these are two different business model or two different promises, then the entire umbrella strategy of having one brand starts to fade away. Yes, it would be a known thing, so there would be certain head start that you might still have, or a level of trust that the consumer might still give you. But ultimately, if the promises are in two different areas, it will be very difficult to deliver it through an umbrella. So if Amway or anybody, any other organization, which are delivering products with the same promise to the consumer, in those cases, umbrella brands can help. But if the promise is not same and it is of a different area, then it would be only a known name. That's just my take.
See, there is an interesting, research done recently by David Kahneman, who was a Nobel Award winner. So basically, there's empirical evidence today that humans don't think rationally. Most decisions are irrational. Most decisions are emotional in nature, right? He talks about system 1 decisions and system 2. System 1 is subconscious, which is automatic, fast, and emotional. And system 2 is cognitive, slow, and you put an effort to figure out and think about the decision you take, right? Now, coming back to this debate or this discussion, if you look at the long-term campaigns, what does long-term campaigns do for the brand is they are emotionally priming the consumers over a period of time subconsciously. Right? I'm giving your example and taking the extending his conversation ahead. If there's an Ola and Uber and you're emotionally primed for an Ola or an Uber, but at the point of decision of clicking an Ola and Uber, there is a pop-up which says, there is a 50 rupees off on a particular ride. Now that's a system 2 discussion, right? So, but that's how long-term campaigns help. You subconsciously primes your mind. It's like a rubber stamp on your system 2 or rubber stamp on your thoughtful and logical discussions or decisions to make. So yeah, like I earlier said, long-term campaigns have their own set of goals, while short-term do their job in a small, weekly, monthly, 2-monthly basis.
But I want to address his other question that he asked, which was about umbrella brands where you have multiple product categories under the same name. And that happens. Happens in financial services all the time, actually. Right? So there is an HSBC and there's an HDFC and there's an ICICI, and they offer multiple products from loans to bank accounts to investment banking, treasury, enterprise level B2B products, as well as B2C products. Almost all of them are in insurance companies and mutual funds and different companies and carry the same name. That's at one level. And second is, let's say, the conglomerates. So I've worked in L&T, which is all kinds of different projects happen in L&T, again, consumer and B2B, or even if you carry the name, Birla. It's a concept which is a little bit more common in Asia, and therefore you have the Samsung and the Mitsubishi, and you have the Japanese brands where you have, and the Chinese brands where you have more multiple product categories and, a conglomerate name. I think there is a lot of socio-cultural reasoning for how brands have developed, and this has happened over a period of time, because if you look at the socio-cultural tenets of the society, we're more relationship B2B-based society. So even if you're doing B2B selling, for example, American selling is very cut and dried. I worked for IBM, so I can tell you that. It's a conversation about business, very, very rational. In India, that doesn't happen. Japan doesn't happen. Singapore doesn't happen. Malaysia doesn't happen. In India, the person that you're selling to, you're selling $1 million contract, right? You even know the buyer who are 10 different influencers, what their families do and where their kids study, okay? So I think the question that you've asked is more to do, one, in the socio-cultural context. And second is, I'd refer you to work which is done on the brand architecture and, brand identity side. And the question that we must ask ourselves is, which is the driver brand when we are selling this product? So am I selling the HSBC credit card, or am I selling the HSBC Master or an HSBC Visa? Which is the driver brand, that is getting sold? So that's where the whole concept of co-branding, also exists and come in. And that, I think, should guide you in developing the proposition that you have for that product category or for that brand, and you need to, see the fitment. Having said that, the decision to build these propositions has to be long-term. You need to think through there definitely 3-year, 5-year, 8-year, 10-year horizon. There are relationships between the two brands that you can't back, away from. And one of the most beautiful example that comes to my mind is around the time that I used to manage, Saffola and Medicare at Marico. I used to watch the hair care category because we had Parachute, of course, and Dabur was establishing Vatika. And to my mind, even now, I think it's the most thoughtful strategy on how they launched the brand. Many of you will not remember, because I watched the category, I know, when they launched the brand, Dabur and Vatika used to have 50% weightage of the logo on the packaging. Okay? Today, if you go and see that brand, it's primarily Vatika, only manufactured by Dabur. It's a thought-out strategy to say that initially, when we are launching, people will not recognize Vatika. People will recognize Dabur. So the driver brand is going to be Dabur. But we want to build a new brand. You want to add valuation to your company's balance sheet by building new equity. So therefore, you build over the years a brand called Vatika, which is dissociated from Dabur. Today, technically, you could actually go and sell Vatika as a brand. Similar brief, for example, when L&T actually sold the cement business, to Birlas, they didn't get much out of it because it was named L&T, and where do you name the brand? Now today, when I'm working, at CK Birla Group, we're incubating 2 new businesses. So there is a lot of work that's happening on new names and brands and stuff like that. It's a discussion which has become a boardroom discussion because people are recognizing, that brands add value to the balance sheet. And therefore, you need to think which brand will work, how will you drive it, and how will you drive it in the long term. Yeah? So just to answer your question on the architecture.
And I think that, for evolving categories, even with established brand names, like for example, I can tell you from my current experience, Tata Power. Tata is a very, very well-known brand, so is Tata Power. But we are getting into some completely new businesses, like solar rooftops, like EV charging, home automation. Now, none of these on their own initially would probably have any equity. As a customer, you will buy into the fact that it comes from the house of Tata Power, which comes from the house of Tata, right? But over a period of time, it will evolve, and like Deepali was saying, even the weightage that you give to your logo, how big is Tata Power, how big is Solar Roof, how big is Easy Home, and so on, conveys something to the consumer, right? Similarly, even within the Tata Group, for example, they have now established different strategies. So Titan came from Tata, but now Tanishq says from the house of Tata, or Starbucks says a Tata Alliance. So while they are drawing their equity from what Tata stands for to all Indians and to now people outside increasingly, the relative weightage conveys something. And I think that is where the power of building an umbrella brand versus taking a conscious decision to build separate brands which come from ITC or come from Nestle or come from Unilever. And like Deepali was saying, it is not just you sit down as a marketing person and say, okay, we'll do this today. There is a well thought through brand to balance sheet to financials equation which comes into play and is a longer term game. So here again, I think to come back to what we were discussing about long term versus short term, I think the way brands are built also from the short term to the long term is a fairly scientific and well thought through process.
I also want to say this, that history doesn't teach you well when it comes to marketing. Brands that got built in the last 100 years, in the first 50, 60 years, got built by chance. Whereas brands that are getting built now are getting built by design. So that's a difference. And history does not always teach you, therefore, how to do it exactly.
I think okay, please. We only have a very quick one because we've got 2 more questions to go. Yeah, please. Can someone pass on the mic, please? No, this gentleman.
Hello, sir. Greetings of the day.
Louder, please.
We
Hello,
can't
sir.
hear you. What's your name?
Am I
Where are
audible?
you from?
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes. Hi, sir. Hi, ma'am. I'm Yash Sapra, and I'm an MBA student. So, my question to you is, like, talking about the new brands, like specifically the FMCG brands, do they take the support of science exploitation to penetrate into the markets? Like, cause no one is that fortunate like Ashirwad Tata, like to launch an initiative like e-Chopal to gain a majority market stake. So what about the emerging FMCG brands, the new brands? Do they take the support of science exploitation to penetrate into the markets or what? Like, what are your views on that?
So let me address that. And let me address it from the point of view, actually the recent most report of, I think IMRB, states that there are a lot of small brands which are doing really well now. Why is that? So if I had to use that, the entire business construct is changing. Okay. There is a certain way the new brands, because of your entire e-com penetration which is increasing, is democratizing the entire reach part. Second part it reduces a lot of total chain costs. So if you want to even start off, even from a single supply source, you can supply to all India. Despite not having your own distribution network, you can ride on these. So actually from what it was say earlier and what it is now, it has become far more democratized, and hence you see a lot of much smaller brand, newer thoughts, differentiated product. That entire gamut has completely changed. And we'll see this will only keep increasing, and that's where a lot of new incubation centers are being opened up within organization, which are also trying to create subcultures or a company within a company who looks after things like that. So actually this is almost like the best time to be a newer brand, to come into play. You need to have obviously a clear insight on which your product is based on, and there has to be a clear-cut consumer need. After that, it is about how you trying to communicate that. You have the avenues through which you can communicate. You have the avenues through which you can distribute. So this is almost like the best time to get into these newer categories, try new things. And that is what we see all around us. The number of brands, the number of micro segments of consumer which are being tapped into, and products are coming for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in fact, we'll have to wait because there are 2 more questions. Just wait for 5 minutes. Okay, now we've done a lot of FMCG. Let's come to payments or fintech. So a company like Mastercard, how do you deal with the brand health or customer loyalty? And is there anything called instant gratification, though we were debating, but what you would want to say on that?
So I'll go back to the earlier discussion. I'm just again continuing the discussion of all the panelists and you. Irrespective of the guidance, especially for our category where the, how do I put it, the involvement of the consumer is not that much, right? Other than the fact that he likes a brand or he likes a particular payment, wallet or a fintech brand per se. For us, the way we look at it is there are 2 parts to it. On one end of the extreme end, you have the small set of campaigns which you run month on month to get transactions, to get volumes, and also possibly new customers, depending upon the objective of the campaign. On the other end of the spectrum is your long build brand campaigns, right? Which is basically building the brand and affinity so that the moment you think of a card, you think of a Mastercard, right? Now, some of the affinity builds are, again, depending on the passion points, like golf is one passion point, like we're building cricket in India, and so on and so forth. Like in the moment you keep on building the long-term play, is there the first thought that comes to you in this category is the brand that, you know, that I'm currently working on? But we also, somewhere over the period of time, and this is not new, I'm sure most marketeers would agree to this, there is also something at the center of it called, you know, something which has been coined as a brand response campaign, which is basically takes a brand idea on the right or the other end of the spectrum and also builds the cues of activation so that that consumers actually transact or there is volumes to the objective. So what happens is when you run a brand response campaign, which is a combination of, which is built on the brand idea, but also urging and encouraging consumers to take that action, you are also getting the best of the both worlds, right? It may not be as impactful as a tactical campaign, or it not be as impactful as a long-term campaign in the long-term period, but over a period of time, it somehow comes to a point that you achieve your business goals in terms of volumes and transactions, but at the same time, the brand goals over a period of 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, I think this is a very different category, and right from the customer acquiring side, it is more of a push game because most of the cases the bank would give you either a Mastercard or a Visa or an Amex. Yes, I think now customers are becoming more knowledgeable that they can demand that, do you have a Mastercard option? I would want to prefer one. That is from an acquiring perspective. From a spend perspective, either online or offline, the kind of points or rewards that a customer get maybe is what leads to pulling out a Mastercard or a Visa.
So we look at like an optimum budget allocation of a 60 on a long-term brand campaign and a 40 on an activation on an always-on basis, right? You know, it keeps your wheels moving on both ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
I think this is one case where the customer is looking at how the short term adds up to his or her long-term value.
And we were discussing Vistara examples, and she was very clear why she shifted to Vistara. Okay, now the last one to Jyoti, and she's been part of agency as well. So this young Gen Z trend or otherwise consumer trend of social media or viral marketing, is it good for the brand? And by any chance, a strong brand like Tata Power, do you also use something like that or not? So you can use both your agency background and the current one.
So I think that the intuitive wisdom is that social media is equal to short term, because we live in this age of 3-second attention is how Facebook sort of charges us and says, if somebody saw my ad for 3 seconds, it's seen, right? So that's the kind of attention that we are dealing with. Now as marketeers, as brand builders, it's something which is very tricky, because if you've got only that much, and if your customer is going to evaluate you by the last thing that he or she saw in social media in their feed when they were just sort of scrolling through it, then how do you really build brand value? And I think the way to look at it is that all of these short-term things are actually leading up to a bigger picture, and therefore you have to be very, very careful of what you do in the short term in the age of social media and viral marketing, which will add value to your brand and not really take away from it. To come to your question of whether we use social media, yes, we do. And there's a different way to look at it. We actually look at social media right now more from the perspective of it being another extension to all the other media that we use. It's very important for us to build our credibility, continue to build our thought leadership. And how do you do that in the age of Insta filters and Facebook and Twitter is something which is it's challenging, but it's also a huge opportunity, because over a period of time, it really allows you to build a brand persona. And I'll take an example of another very different category. So we were talking about Ola and Uber. There's Zomato and there's Swiggy, right? The way they are building their brand on using social media, because that's the kind of audience they speak to. I think it's one of the best examples of how social media can be used, both for the short term, to give you an offer right now, but also over a period of time, build this imagery in your mind that Zomato is the first app that you go to, or Swiggy is the first app that you go to.
Yeah, very well said. So now we'll come back to the two questions. This gentleman, if you can just pass on the mic. I know time's up, but we'll take 2-3 more minutes. And there was another gentleman that side.
So, ma'am, I am Sandeep Sonwalkar. I am President PR Professional. I just spoke about crisis communication before you. Just one question, because we handle power sector very well. We are basically handling power ministry and RK Singh directly. So normally debate on free biz. When political pointers come, they always talk about free biz, not about the power sector. So how you deal the political pressure as a communication point of view?
Out of syllabus.
There is only one thing that I will say. I think the power sector is one sector where the first thing we all have to learn is that all publicity and all advertising is not necessarily good publicity and good advertising. So what we say no to and what we don't comment on and what we don't do is probably much more important than what we actually end up doing and what you see.
And a question there.
Yeah, so I'm Manish Gupta.
Sir, if you could introduce yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Manish Gupta this side. I just, on the long-term, short-term gains for the brands in the marketplace, the cost of switching the brand also makes a lot of, impact on this. So if you have low cost of switching a brand, then probably the short-term, strategies are more important. And also from the consumer behavior point of view, recently we have seen a lot of changes.
So what's the question?
Already trial for a new brand is much more faster than it used to be earlier. So brand loyalty per se has taken a bit of a hit these days.
No, so I agree with you. If there's low cost of switching, people will switch. And if there is very high cost to switching, people won't switch, So I agree with you over there. I think today's discussion, we had a lot more discussion on the FMCG side, but when it comes to service industry, okay, and you look at banking, you look at, airline frequent flyer miles, you look at mileage points on certain cards, they're not transferable. And, that makes me live with, even when I bought the brand, it was 10 on 10 in my mind in terms of benefits and the emotional benefits and rational benefits. Even if the brand today is, let's say, 8 on 10, 7.5 on 10, and we've seen Axis recently actually on their Magnus card have reduced the benefits. I've seen that with HDFC Infinia also. Over the period of years, they've reduced it. But there is a huge degree of loyalty on account of the fact that the cost of switching is just too high, and it's, there is inertia built into it. And there, the way you look at loyalty marketing is very different. And you need to look at the model to see whether the model is still workable for you over a period of years. I used to work for a brand called Mahindra Holidays. We've tied in people for 25 years over there, right? So there is a lot of liberty you take because of that. I agree with what you had to say.
Yeah. Anyone else? We are already ahead of time. Okay, so thank you so much, Jyoti, Deepali, Suresh, and Puneeth. I think it was wonderful, and I believe all of us agree that it has to be hybrid with a sight towards the long-term vision, but there are a lot of short-term things that the brands need to do. And one thing which is very, very clear is that when anyone is building a brand, they would prefer to build a brand which thousands of people love rather than millions of them only like. So loving a brand consistently is what everybody wants. So thank you so much. And thank you to Business World as well, I think, to organize such a great event.